Hi, everyone. It's Joe Veneri, the host of Fit Insider, the show where I talk with the entrepreneurs, executives, and investors who are redefining the business of fitness and wellness. Today, I'm joined by Robin Thurston, CEO of Outside. Outside, or Pocket Outdoor Media as it was formerly known, is a platform for active lifestyle content and experiences. In this episode, we talk about the acquisitions, rebrand, and $150 million funding round that helped turn Pocket into Outside. Robin shares his vision for a recurring revenue bundle across all aspects of an active lifestyle, and we discuss the challenges and opportunities brought on by the coronavirus pandemic. A quick reminder before we get into today's show. Every Tuesday, we send a weekly newsletter filled with insights and analysis on the business of fitness and wellness. Join other decision makers and industry operators by subscribing at insider.fit.co. Let's get into it. Hi, Robin. Welcome to Fit Insider. Thanks for joining us.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Certainly a lot to talk about. And I think maybe to kick things off, could you introduce yourself and tell us about Outside, which until recently was Pocket Outdoor Media. And so maybe you can give us the rundown from there.
Yeah. So I'm Robin Thurston. I'm the CEO of Outside. We just acquired both Outside Magazine and OutsideTV. And, we felt so strongly about the brand and kind of where it sits in the category that, it was a good name to go to and sort of adopt and, really think about how to expand what, really Larry had built over 45 years. It was, I would say, somewhat of a path to get here. I always like to tell entrepreneurs that there is no, sort of easy way. There's no, quick way. A lot of people look at this and say, oh my God, all this happened in less than 2 years. But there definitely has been a lot of pieces. So, we started, like I said, a little bit over 2 years ago. I had owned part of some cycling events in Colorado called Roll Massif, which I actually have the t-shirt on for. And that's 9 cycling events that are gravel, mountain, road. I'd started building essentially what, was a personalized CMS platform for the active lifestyle space. And we had originally intended on selling that to Outside or selling it to Runner's World or other people. And so, I had some engineers from my old MapMy days helping me on that. And then I had the opportunity to invest and take a majority share in what was the original Pocket Outdoor Media. And that event came out of the fact that Competitor Group, which owns the Rock and Roll Series marathons, had previously purchased these publications and they were being sold to Ironman, and Ironman was going to basically shut them down. They were going to shut down the pubs. And so they called the old founder and said, do you want him back? He called me, said, we'd love to transition them to digital. How could you help me? And I said, I'm willing to do it if I could take a majority ownership. So that was Velo News, Triathlete Magazine, Women's Running, Podium Runner, and the book business, which is called VeloPress and has about 150 titles in it. And a few other things. Then we bought Bicycle Retailer on the B2B side. We basically we started working on the technology to implement onto those platforms because we really saw the power of how the syndication and personalization would work cross-platform. And then down the street from me here in Boulder, Andy Klerman called me, who was the CEO of Active Interest Media. And he said, look, WinPoint Equity they're going to, basically want to divest the assets. They'd been in it a long time. And he said, would you be interested in, he knew what we were doing on the Pocket side, in terms of the endurance brands. And he said, would you be interested in Ski Magazine and Yoga Journal and Backpacker and Climbing and a bunch of nutrition brands like Clean Eating and Vegetarian Times and Better Nutrition, as well as Warren Miller Entertainment, which was, the 70-year library of the Warren Miller films and the Fly Fishing Tour and a few other things. And I was like, well, yeah, it's perfect. It sort of fills out the whole active lifestyle category for us. And so then COVID hit. We were sort of in those discussions right before COVID. And I had to really, I would say, really, hustle to get the funding done and get all those pieces put together. We'll put that together in June of last year, and then really started bringing that team over and integrating them and, just some great leadership and talent and people that, frankly, had not had a lot of resources to do some of the things that they really wanted to do, as well as just going through the transition of print to digital, which is, has been very painful for many publishers. And so we did that. And then, there was another company up in Carbondale, Colorado called Big Stone that owned Rock and Ice and Trail Runner and Gym Climber. And so we had the opportunity to acquire them. And then we bought another smaller publication in California called Paleo Magazine. And then one thing that wasn't like people perceived it as content, but I would say it was part of our sort of transition in doing more than just content was the Finisher Picks acquisition and, just a great team, some really, really cool technology around image recognition and some other things that they had done that we were interested in for the whole platform. So we convinced them to sort of join forces with us and really see the vision of kind of where we were headed around the membership layer. And I wouldn't say we thought we were done at that point. We were kind of like, this is a lot. We've bit off a lot. We had a fairly good Series A, and I sort of joke we were starting to like sort of settle in. We were like, okay, we're getting all the technology done. We're putting all these pieces together. The team is sort of gelling, and things are really working. And then I had established a relationship with Larry Burke, the founder of Outside, about a year before, because my mom lives in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and so I had gone down there and I had lunch with them. And I think at the time he thought we were somewhat of a small, I don't know about you guys, but he called me out of the blue right before Thanksgiving, this last year, and he just said, "Look, Robin, I'm 78 years old, and I think there might be an opportunity to sell the whole thing. And I'd love to pull OutsideTV together with Outside Magazine." And I kind of went into high gear. We were also talking to the Gaia team, and we really thought the mapping piece, obviously my background coming from founding a mapping company, wasn't too hard to figure out. But we were really excited about them and bringing that data and knowledge and utility into the platform. So we had these sort of two bigger acquisitions, and we just kind of went into high gear looking for the right investment partner. And I came across Michael Moritz through another connection friend of mine from YPO, and Michael just really got it and so did the whole Heritage team, the Sequoia Heritage team, that just really understood what we were trying to do. And we sort of locked in with them over Christmas, and we're working through diligence and getting things sort of to the point where it was sort of there and moving along pretty nicely. And, then we had a few other small ones like Peloton Magazine, which was really part of our whole cycling play. And the AthleteReg team, which on the race registration side is really a critical part, sort of married together with Finisher Picks, but just sort of servicing the whole event business as a way to really bring people into the ecosystem and really help event directors drive more traffic. Because fundamentally our goal is to get more people doing these activities. So events are a big part of that. And, obviously COVID slowed down the event business, but so we all of this was sort of shifting around, coming together, and we didn't know it was going to come together all at the same time. I think it was a little bit of serendipity, but we were able to, sort of pull it all off. And we've really felt like Outside was the best sort of brand representation of everything we were doing. We were actually in I'd say a fairly lengthy, about 6 months ago. Before that, we had started working on a rebrand for Pocket, because we definitely knew it wasn't going to be the brand for the long run. But, just everything really came together, and, we're really excited about TV and, the whole platform. So
yeah, there's a lot in there, and I kind of wanted to let you kind of parse through some of that, and then we'll dig in. But you mentioned at the onset, right? Like telling entrepreneurs that it's rarely a straight line, and sometimes not what you expected. How much of this, when you got involved, I think in 2019, was the vision versus what it became today? And it sounds like there were just some really amazing opportunities along the way that you couldn't say no to, or maybe presented themselves at the right time. Or how much of it was, hey, we're going to go out and we're going to roll up this space in a certain way that brings together the content and the personalization and the events. So I guess what's vision versus reality in this case?
It's funny. I was talking to a good friend of mine, Bobby Julik, who has a podcast with us, and he and I had sat down in, I don't know, Aspen. Maybe it was like maybe 3 or 4 months before I had even, sort of decided to go from a board role at Pocket, and even though I was the majority owner, to sort of taking over. And I'd sort of laid out this, framework for the outdoor category of like, how could it potentially all come together? Like, what are the pieces? Like, how would you create a better consumer experience? So I wouldn't be so specific in that we were like, okay, we're going to go buy these brands, because that's not really normally how it works out. It was more like, how would you create something that is a more seamless, less fragmented, more personalized, sort of holistic system for the consumer? Because I mean, in some ways I go all the way back to the Under Armour days, which, was why, originally they bought Map My Fitness. Then we created a strategy out of that to go after MyFitnessPal and Endomondo and a number of other apps that we sort of pulled into that ecosystem, as well as marrying it with, UnderArmour.com. And that too wasn't like the strategy was all laid out 3 years before, right when I got there. And then all of a sudden it was like, here we are, this, 200 million person platform with all these different, pieces sort of coming together in what was called Under Armour Record. But I would just say people have been trying to figure this out for a while. I think what's different right now is that it is a category, outdoor and sort of the whole endurance, certainly nutrition specific to the sort of almost what I call the active lifestyle category, because there's a lot of food magazines, right? But I'm talking about the magazines and the products and the storytelling around like what will help you perform better. There's not a lot of those, right? And then certainly the fitness category and yoga category, sort of like those areas. And I think the one thing I always say about like one of the things was sort of a focus of mine was less about like, here are the specific pieces. And it was like, how do you really service the multi-activity, active lifestyle person? Like, what is it that we can do that is different from what everybody else has created? The MapMys, the Stravas, the Whoops, all of the other ones that are out there, partner with those people because we wanted that, we want to create an ecosystem-like feel. But what do we do that's different? And we really felt like content was the beachhead. Like if you had a really strong content base, there was a reason for you to come back to us every day. And so that was sort of I'd say the core pillar, but then it was sort of clear that gave us the authenticity to sort of move into some of these other categories, and again, it's not, I every day I sort of say this to the team, which is like, in some ways building a company from scratch is really hard because you go through all the turmoil of like the starts and stops, and like one person quitting can like pull you back months, right? Because you're like three people, right? You're like, oh God, what am I going to do? This is a different strategy, but, we also have like, there's a lot of challenges in bringing this many pieces. I mean, we've had 11 acquisitions in 13 months or something like that, right? So there's just a lot of dispersed pieces. We have a big strategy around how to unify them from an authentication perspective and unify them from a user perspective. But it's not easy. And as I say to the team every day, like it's not going to be rainbows and unicorns every day, right? Like there's lots of challenges.
Yeah. And I think at least to this point, right, you're figuring out how to put all these pieces together, lots of activity on the acquisition front, trying to bring those teams together, then raising new funding, acquiring and rebranding. So now you have this kind of question of like, what does it look like? Maybe even if we fast forward a little bit or however long it takes, right? The business model and the user experience. So what are you looking at as like, hey, we're bringing this together under one unified brand. Now this is what the business model ultimately amounts to. And this is how we're thinking about it.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, the premise of the business model sort of transformation hasn't changed, which is the whole idea was advertising is probably as unstable of a business or variable of a business as you could be in. And truthfully, the market is not valuing these ad businesses that highly because they're not really reoccurring businesses. There are lots of ups and downs quarter to quarter, especially at the size when you look at our ad business across the entire platform. So the model was always to switch from essentially an ad-only supported model into a digital subscription model. Luckily, we have over 1.5 million paying customers today that are combined between the print subscriptions that we're converting. They'll still get print, but they're being converted into digital subscription. But the model really, so the change of digital sort of advertising and print advertising into digital subscription and print was really the core thesis all along. Now, in order to create something that was truly differentiated, we said, one is it has to be cross-platform. So it has to be more like Netflix or Prime than it has to be like a vertical category where you are just buying like a cycling membership or something, right? We felt like it, again, going back to my thesis, which was 60% at least of our user base does at least 3 activities in a year, and they do 12 to 15 activities over a lifetime. So if you think about servicing them over a lifetime, you have to catch them when they're moving from cycling to surfing, from surfing to skiing. Like you have to catch them in that motion. Otherwise, you just lose them. They just go dark on you, right? Because they're like, I'm done with that sport and I'm moving on to the next one, right? And so, that was really the premise all along. I think as we add in these other pieces, it was about creating more value, like bringing Gaia into the membership and giving people $40 of value for all that deep mapping as part of their $100 a year membership, or bringing things from AthleteReg like event insurance and discount on events and early access to events, or adding things like accident insurance to the membership. All of these things are ways, in my opinion, to create what I would call the sort of must-have membership in the category. And then people will decide. I mean, you and I don't have one membership. I mean, if you look through your phone, it's not one, but we want to be in that position where we are the one that you start out with in the category. And then if you decide you're going to get Peloton or Strava or whatever it is, great, right? Like that's great. But we want to be the one where basically it is like your Netflix or Prime. You're like, well, I can't live without that one. Like that's the one I got to have. And I don't think, in my opinion, no one had done that in the category. And that's what maybe is a little bit different. But I also wouldn't say it's like a business model I created. Like there are other people out there that have successfully pulled this off in other categories.
Sure. There's this idea broadly, like recurring revenue bundle, right? So you're getting all these things that somehow play into this broader value. And, as time goes on, you go deeper in different categories, like you mentioned. And then from your side, Outside is able to deliver more and more value across that lifetime of the consumer journey, whatever that means to them in terms of an active lifestyle.
Exactly.
I think there's a lot of interesting pieces there. One of them being the opportunity to look at how deep can you go in terms of integrating that experience for the consumer, right? So there's like obviously the content piece, and then some of you mentioned insurance and events and discounts, but is it a matter of, hey, we own the event company. We also own XYZ thing. We have the, nutrition. We can send like a meal plan that you can add on. How far down that path are you thinking? Or is it more so just this, the relationship with the content and more of the media asset pieces?
No, we're creating, we sort of preliminarily announced that we're launching essentially a single sign-on cross-platform for all of our properties that we'll also use for third parties, which is just sign in with Outside. So you will create an Outside account no matter where you are. And if you are a Active Pass member, if you sign in with that account, you'll get the benefits of all of those dispersed services. And I think, and that really is this year, like that's like that we're today we kind of tell the user, a consumer, here's all the things that you're getting right today, but look out, because here's all the things that are coming with your one account that you're creating on our platform. And I think when you look at like what Disney Plus is doing with ESPN and Hulu and creating a single account, like, and making it seamless for the user to log in and get those benefits, or Prime is doing when you walk into the grocery store and scan your code. And those are all the things we want to do to link these experiences together. Now, one thing you said, like there are things that we think we can sort of give a better consumer experience if we own. In other words, that they're in the portfolio and we sort of have 100% control, like of some events, right? Because we can do special things to test at those events versus like if somebody else owns the event, we might be able to partner with them and do some things, but it might not be as a seamless of experience as like what happens at one of the Roll Mass Eve events, right? That's special for the Active Pass member, right? But our hope is that as we build out this ecosystem and we really build the tools for partners, that we can do those integrations even more seamlessly to create value that's not owned by us, but that's, sort of in the ecosystem. And the example here that I give is like, I don't know, look at American Express and how many benefits they offer you. And then you of course have to go create logins at those other things. And, you have to use coupon codes and it's, there is friction, right? So we want to try to eliminate as much of that friction in our ecosystem as possible. But the reality is that there are some things better sort of like we feel owned and creating an experience versus like just through the partnership layer.
As you're talking about this, there's so many aspects of it, whether you look at the Amazon Prime or Netflix or, other examples you cite with American Express, that this approach has seemed to have played out in different ways across other industries. But for some reason, as it relates to like fitness and wellness and the active lifestyle, like it hasn't quite gotten there. And we also see it like with now what's happening with fitness and gyms and studios more broadly, like this idea of hybrid or omni-channel approach, and you have to have this technology layer. And like, why do you think it is that it just hasn't quite gotten to the fitness or active lifestyle industry in the same way that maybe it has other industries where we've seen technology and the business model evolve and the approach evolve, that it's unified or integrated across the landscape?
I have a bunch of theories. Like, I think when you think about digital fitness, like I always joke when I went out to raise money for Map My Fitness the first time, like this is 2000, like end of 2008, 2009, right after the iOS store app, App Store launched. And I remember so many investors who frankly were very, very sophisticated investors were like, no one's ever going to run or ride with a phone. And I was like, I don't know. It seems like a great use case. Like, you got safety, you got music, you got mapping. Like, I don't know. What do you mean they're not going to do it? And they're like, oh, no one's going to do that. There's plenty of devices for that stuff. And by the way, that's only for typosphere people. Only the top 1% are going to use these devices, right? And so, I think there's a bit about like just evolution, I guess I would say. Like, people ask me frequently, like, well, what inning do you think we're in this whole sort of digital fitness thing? And I'm like, we're still like in the third, maybe even the end of the second. Like, we're not even like, there's so many things that are going to be transformational from a user experience perspective. Like this morning, I was talking to a good friend of mine, Phil Sutherland, who runs Super Sapien. And, that is early technology around this glucose monitoring. And I've done some of it myself. And my wife has been doing it for years because she had gestational diabetes. And I think those things are going to be transformational at some point, right? But it is all just this sort of evolution, right? The other thing about fitness too, like people, when you think about these other industries at some level, obviously tech has sprouted up very fast and there's big money been made, obviously market cap explosion around big tech. So it makes sense that there's a lot of investment going there. I think the problem in fitness and sort of wellness is that there hasn't been as much investment here. Like, think about the number of public companies, Fitbit, Peloton, just had Beachbody go public in a SPAC. It's not like, other than what I call the apparel makers, it's not like there's 500 public companies in the space, right? So I think there's some perception that the industry is not big enough, right? Like, it's not big enough to have these. And so I think that underinvestment, I'm not one to talk. I've obviously raised a lot of capital in the space, but I would say generally less investment than some other verticals will certainly slow down the progression. So I just think we're on a journey here.
Yeah, and with that, it's certainly taking these learnings, applying them to the space, accelerating the growth, having the opportunity to be a first mover. But really, it's not, because some of these things have already played out and been proven. It's just reapplying them. I think is exciting and a good learning there. One of the other things I wanted to ask about as it relates to the space, but also the consumer experience more broadly, two things that come up, which are just kind of buzzwords, but also incredibly important, are community and personalization, right? It's everybody, if you're building in this space, the community aspect, we've seen it with Strava, we've seen it with Peloton, certainly. And then personalization. How do we get to this point where we can serve up relevant things to people at a time when it matters to them? How are you thinking about approaching both of those things as you continue to build out the platform?
I think one is, I do think it's like these baby steps at some level. Like, you obviously have to product roadmap, test stuff. I do love the idea. A lot of times people, I think, try to perfect things. And I would say my experience is that, like, you just need to get stuff in front of consumers, right? So like, there's some people that look at the tech right now and they're like, I don't really understand how the personalization works, or why would I log in, or, things like that. And I think that we could say, oh, well, we should have waited another year, right, to like really blow up and launch this out. But I just think that you need to sort of, like, consumers also don't love a lot of change right away either. And so it's like almost the iterative process is better, right? Because you can sort of test things, learn. And again, I think that's something that we have to do. I think the main thing I would say is, like, we have to keep the quality of the content and an absolute authentic, amazing storytelling. Like, without that, like, the whole thing comes undone, right? Then how we integrate the rest of the pieces, I think we just want to keep taking friction out of the system so that the consumer is just getting a better and better experience month by month, year by year, as we kind of move through that pipeline. And I just think we have to bring, like, the hardest part about any, what I call sort of unlimited membership, like it has everything in it, is making sure the consumer is aware of what they're actually getting. Like, and making sure that before they cancel, that they know that, like, they're going to miss out on like a free Warren Miller ticket or a fly fishing tour ticket. Like, we have to make sure that we're sort of stitching all those things together. And there's lots of, you buy a membership to Costco, you have no idea all the things that are under the Costco membership or under the Prime membership. Like, go look at the list on Prime. There's so many things that I've never used. And so it's hard for the consumer because it is probably 2 or 3 things that you use. And so we got to make sure we're building those things and building them really well, but then also informing them about the tail of things that they can use.
And then bringing that together, do you see, beyond the personalization, the opportunity to connect people across that are participating in these events from a community, a social aspect, and make it more interactive that way?
I mean, yeah, definitely. I think there's just a big opportunity around that's whole seamless experience. I just think that is ultimately the part that they're like, I used to talk about this all the time at, Matt, there's so much friction still in the system. Like, my point is, like, go register for an event. I mean, it is not easy, actually, right? Like, even with these registration platforms, like, go try to find, like, if you wanted to go look right now for, like, here's all the events where you're located and get ratings and reviews and pictures of them. Like, it's actually kind of hard to do. You got to, like, do all these Google searches, go to these specific sites, and then decide, okay, I'm going to do this 10K this weekend, or I'm going to do this bike ride, or whatever it is. So I just think it is a lot about, one is, like, not overdoing it. Like, you'd argue right now, people look at my list of brands and they're just like, but I do think it's just about eliminating those small pieces of friction to ultimately give that consumer a better experience. Because my view is that in this category, and this is like in fitness specifically, like fitness and sports, is that if you are passionate about these sports, you will go through a tremendous number of headaches to just go do what you love to do, right? But the question is like, what's the consumer going to feel like on the other side of it when there's no friction or very little friction to do these things? How much more regularly will they participate? How much more gear might they buy? How much more, sort of friendships in terms of attaching and bringing groups together might that happen? And do I think Facebook groups is the best place for, like, a fitness group? No, because there's all kinds of functionality missing there. Or do I think it's the easiest way? Like, my joke is always like, I'll register for an event, and if I don't like text people and say, like, I'm doing this event, half the time I'll have a friend show up at the same event and they'll be like, well, I didn't know you were here. And so it's like things like that we definitely do want to, from a social perspective, try to make sure there's a lot of awareness around, because I used to say, like, I could have, when I was bike racing, like, I could train by myself all the time, but, like, now that I'm just sort of, like, doing it for fun, I want to ride with people. Like, I want to go out or I want to run with people. And so making all of that stuff easier and eliminating that friction, I think, is absolutely critical to building a great product.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. I think and you mentioned how much more would people who are already willing to go through the headache, what would they buy or do or participate? Not to mention all the people that aren't doing it now because it's such a pain. It's like this whole other side of the market. They're just, like, not even engaging that could be engaged if it were more seamless. Yeah. I think it's interesting, it's still early in the year. You have had, a slew of acquisitions, raised the funding, rebranded. If you're looking at the year in terms of milestones, what are the things that you're talking to the team about that you need to achieve so that, you get to the other side of this year and feel like it was a success?
Yeah, look, we're working through a lot of the integration pieces. So, my hope by the end of the year is that we will have, almost what I call sort of a unified authentication and sort of seamless experience for the customer to log in, that they can easily understand, like, what's available in the platform, start to see some lift from, like, as an example, if all ActivePass members get access to Gaia, like, well, how many people actually activated through that channel versus just directly from the iOS app or something like that, right? So, like, measuring those things about how is integration working. But I do think more fundamentally, that it's a lot about just, like, getting the team to cohesively work together, right? Because you still have brought a lot of disparate pieces together. and people at different levels, like, journalists are not the same as engineers, and, like how that sort of plays together. And so, I think a lot of it is just like, and I do think we built a great team. My CEO, Danielle Quattrocchi, who was, 10 years at Nike, and, she was helped build the finishline.com business for 5 years. Like, we brought a great team of people together to be able to execute this, but it is about getting the team. I mean, if I think about it personally, yes, we have revenue goals. Yes, we have integration goals. Yes, we have all these things. But if I look back at the end of the year, I think the main thing for me will be how well did we get the team to work together?
And then I guess just quickly, like, how many of those folks have you even been able to meet and interact with, just given it's all been done remote? Those, even within the teams, they probably haven't met each other. So what has that experience been like?
Yeah, I mean, I've done a lot of M&A in my life, and I would say I'd never been through an experience where I was doing it basically over, Zoom, right? I mean, it's a very, very different situation. I mean, obviously you and I can sit here and do a podcast over Zoom and it's fine, but I think it's definitely one of the most challenging things. So when I go back to like getting the team to work together, like I miss the offsites and the, strategy thinking of being all in the same room and seeing that energy and feeling how people are sort of resonating with that. And I say it will cause us some challenges, and, we're trying to, make sure like we have unlimited time off, because we know this is a stressful time for people, and like we want them to take it and really try to mentally decompress, because I do think COVID is probably causing a lot more mental, sort of challenges than people realize. So there was sort of part of me at the beginning of last year when, COVID really started, which was just like, I did feel like it was a huge opportunity. I mean, I know it sounds funny, but like I had looked back to 2008, 2009, when Matt and I got going, and we were in the financial crisis, right? And we had tremendous success then in getting things off the ground. And I remember saying to my wife, I just said, look, I think there's a really big opportunity that might be a once in a lifetime market creating opportunity right now. And so, I mean, a little bit, the bike rider in me kind of put my head down and was just like, let's just go as hard as we can. Unfortunately, look, as I said, it's messy. Not everything is going to be perfect. And, we want to try to do the best we can by all of these teams. We haven't laid anyone off. We didn't furlough anyone last year. So all of that was, there were lots of challenging decisions running through last year, not only while you're building, but also while you're trying to figure out how the businesses that are there are doing and managing. And so look, in retrospect, I wouldn't wish it on anyone, because I do think the in-person sort of, getting to know, whether it's the founder, whether it's the team, is so, so important. And I'm sure, like I said, it will not be perfect, but I do think we've just tried really hard to over-index on how we bring the team, together, and as much things as we can do. Like, I love this thing in Slack called Donuts, where 3 people get together and they meet, and, it's rotating and it's random, and, people get together. And I think things like that have really helped. So I appreciate that the technology is out there to allow us to do these things. So, I still say the biggest opportunity that was created out of COVID was, and this is my reality from the category, is that, realistically, we're talking about probably, there's more people now in these categories than there ever have been. And frankly, I think we have the brand that represents exactly what people should be doing, which is getting outside, because, it is maddening in some ways to think about how much time we've spent in our homes. Right. I mean, so I'm hopeful that all of it ends up being, again, well-timed, and, it will be a little messy, but that, ultimately people get outside.
Yeah. I think more so than other conversations, this one just naturally is like, and stay tuned for part 2. We want to see how this year goes, bringing it all together. I certainly think you're right. When you just look at statistics from All Trails and Strava and just any survey, the number of people that are going outside and have picked up cycling or have gotten back into running. Now, as we start to see some of these events turn back on, or different ways for people to engage and to start training together and socializing, it's going to be really interesting to see how it plays out. And you all are certainly incredibly well positioned there. I think the last thing is we look to wrap up the conversation. Do you plan to still be active on the acquisition front, or is it a matter of like now operationalizing some of the things you have going on?
The way I'd answer the question is that we're definitely not done. There are, opportunities that are still in the market that we think are really unique to sort of filling out our picture. But, I would just say that it is about thinking about the consumer experience. How do we build the best consumer experience? So anything that we do, I think this isn't a traditional roll up. It's not like just put a bunch of brands together and get some efficiencies and, that's not what this is about. It really is about looking at things in the market that we think are creating real value for the consumer and then building them into the ecosystem. And some things, like I said, we'll decide to buy because we think it's so synergistic, and other things we will just partner with, And so I definitely say we are not done, but it's not like I can say to you, there's going to be 5 next month, because it's not like that. Like it is in some level understanding the market and really going after the things that we think are most critical to the user.
Yeah. Well, listen, we'll certainly be following along and watching, and encourage listeners to do the same. For anyone interested in learning more, what's the best? Is it outside.com now? What's the best way to learn more and kind of follow?
You said founders and people in the industry and stuff like that. So we do have OutsideInc.com is the corporate site where, if you're interested in how to advertise on the platform or you want to partner with us, there's actually a form there where you can fill in and say, I'm interested in partnering with, Bella News or, a Gaia or whatever it might be. And so that is the best place to get a hold of us from the standpoint of wanting to partner and work with us.
Perfect. And I encourage folks to do that. Super grateful for the time you made today and really excited to share this conversation.
My pleasure. Thanks so much.
Thanks everyone for listening to today's episode. For more from Fit Insider, visit insider.fit.co and subscribe to our weekly newsletter for insights and analysis on the business of fitness and wellness. Then go ahead and subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. See you next time.